Hello, listeners. Welcome back to Frontline Fridays, brought to you by YOOBIC. I'm Ron Thurston, your host, the voice behind the Retail in America podcast, and the founder of the just launched retail recruiting platform called Aussie. You can go to useaussie.com, that's USEOSSY, to learn more. And on this podcast, we sit down with leaders who are inspiring excellence in the front line and really learn what they do differently. And we've had a variety of really incredible leaders over the past several episodes. But I'm really thrilled to welcome Khris Hamlin to the show, and I'm going to introduce him a bit. Khris Hamlin's a veteran in the retail industry, serves as the Vice President of Asset Protection at the Retail Industry Leaders Association, which is RILA. And I didn't fully understand what RILA is, and I'm going to have Khris explain that because their impact on our industry and the frontline experience runs really deep. So I'm excited for Khris to share that and to talk about asset protection today. His 30-year career began in asset protection at Hex, which has later become part of Macy's, where he spent 25 years in various roles, including store management and advancing his professional expertise. He honed his skills at companies like Belk and Nordstrom, and his most recent role prior to RILA was at Saks Off Fifth. And he applied his insights to managing the US operations and innovate in remote monitoring. In his current role at RILA, Khris applies his extensive experience as a bipartisan voice, offering guidance and expertise to leaders of top retail brands. RILA, is a prominent trade association which unites major retail brands and thought leaders across the US, advocating for retailers and driving profitability. Khris's advisory scope spans government relations, retail operations, legal matters, HR, diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives, and so much more. Besides its corporate role, Khris is a busy man and is the CEO and Chief Impact Officer at the Khris Hamlin Company, LLC, and he serves as a board member of the International Organization of Black Security Executives, the IOBSC. His hands-on frontline experience enriches his understanding of retail, allowing him to provide invaluable insights directly from store teams during his travels. And so with that, I will say welcome, Khris, to Frontline Fridays.
Ron, thank you so much for the welcome. I hear that and I'm like, oh my goodness, I am a little busy, I guess. Out there, so.
We won't even talk about family and everything else that you've got going on, which I know that you do. So let's really start here at kind of 30,000 feet. So I want to, as I introduced in the beginning, I wanted to have you just share at a kind of a high level, what is RILA, and then what is your role within that?
Absolutely. So, at RILA, we play a vital role at supporting retailers across a wide variety of areas. When you think about things like governmental policies, operation, legal issues, human resources, and asset protection, and many facets within the retail industry in totality. Our goal at RILA is really bringing together thought leaders, the leaders within the retail industry, those thought leaders together in a forum where they can collaborate, they can teach, and they can educate with each other, and really tackle some of the challenges that persist across the retail industry. And with the goal of driving a vibrant and a financial or economically strong retail environment. And within RILA, I support the asset protection world. So I serve, like you said earlier, as the VP of Asset Protection, and I support that arm within RILA.
Mm-hmm. And asset protection is, we'll just say a high on the list of conversations about what's happening in retail, 2023, 2024, and beyond. And so in this role, let's just dig a little deeper in, like, how do you kind of see the current state and what's on your agenda for 2024?
Yeah, we are in a tough place when you think about asset protection. And I'll take a step back. We'll talk about retail crime in totality. So you think about retail crime, you think about the violence that we saw within the retail crime area coming out of 23, and over the past couple of years we've seen this. The big thing on the horizon for RILA was in 2023, we launched our Vibrant Communities Initiative. And this initiative was geared at going after those organized crime, the organized theft rings, and looking at ways to bring back the vibrancy within the retail environment, to go after those habitual offenders, and also looking at ways to provide or connect retailers with social service entities to help with, potentially, retailers are faced with a huge unhoused population that visits retailers.
Mm.
You also have individuals that are dealing with mental health crises, or those that are abusing drugs within the retail setting and just making it an unsafe environment. And so working with retailers in this collaborative approach with law enforcement, social service entities, and prosecutors is really our big push. And as we started in 23, and we're leaning heavily into that Vibrant Communities Initiative here in 24.
And how else does that show up in influence in local government? So county, state, federal, well, the conversations you and I have had, it's fascinating to learn, how much of a challenge that can be in an asset protection world and kind of regulation. So staying at a high level, like how does government regulation impact your work?
It's huge, Ron. So when you think about it, many retailers, they have footprints throughout many different states across North America and even into Canada. So even outside of the United States, and these retailers have to operate in a fashion that's, one, safe for the consumer to shop, safe for their employees to work in, and also have to stay in business. They have to be able to provide product to be able to drive some level of profitability to stay in business. And so when you think about local jurisdiction, whether it is state by state or municipality by municipality, the laws change. Some thresholds for criminal activity, a felony or misdemeanor, the values of that changes by area. The law is perceived or interpreted differently by areas as well. So it makes it very complex at times for retailers to back in the day, we used to call it, back when we were in stores, Ron, we called it the cookie cutter approach. You could have one program that you could roll out to the fleet. But where we are today is we have to have these bite-sized approaches that really target the systemic issues to be able to bring about change. And so that's where, we leverage that collaboration with prosecutors. We have a partnership with the National District Attorneys Association, where we leverage that partnership to connect prosecutors with the retailers to really say, hey, in New York or in Texas or in Canada, how are we addressing and focusing locally on these concerns? That same approach happens with local law enforcement. If it's a city prosecutor, if it's a local social service entity, those connections are happening on the ground in those local municipalities or cities to be able to address it within the communities. And that's the goal with Vibrant Communities. It's how do we address our communities in our backyard? That's where you and I both enjoy shopping in our backyard. That's where our friends and our family work at. And so how do we change that bite size across the nation at a time?
Yeah, and imagining the complexities of that at scale. And so I think if we take a step down now and say, what are some of those misconceptions about people that work in asset protection? And I'll share my own story as a vice president of stores for several different brands. My LP manager, asset protection manager, whatever the title is we used, was such an incredible partner for me in every step of the way, because his expertise, I will say his, because in this case, it was his expertise, understanding all of those complexities at scale was something I didn't understand. My role as a head of stores, but we traveled together very consistently, very difficult situations that have arisen in the last several years. He was right there next to me, helping me navigate very complex issues. And so when I say that only because I think sometimes in stores, there is misconception about the role of asset protection and what you can actually do. So maybe expand on that a bit.
I'll start there, and I'll share a couple other myths that are out there too. But the number one thing or number one frustration that I hear from frontline employees, even when I was in stores, was, "Hey, I called and told you this person was doing X, and you didn't respond." And so the myth is out there is that asset protection, their hands are tied, they can't do anything. Well, that's not the case. One of the biggest things is that the asset protection team is trained on different steps that they have to follow to be able to substantiate a theft that's actually happened or occurred. And they have to be able to follow those steps to be able to deliver that or to convey that information to a law enforcement professional that will then make the decision if they're going to arrest the criminal or not. And then it has to also be sustainable enough that a prosecutor will say they're going to prosecute those charges. So that loss prevention asset protection employee is making determination. They're looking at, have I established all of these things so that I don't place the business or the company at risk because we didn't follow a step and we presented a case too early or too soon. And so it's a myth that they can't do anything. And there's times where individuals will come into the store and might get away. They might get away today, but that information is retained. That information is captured, and it's able to be documented as evidence, so that when they do come back, and I got to tell you, Ron, you and I know, if they get away one time, 9 times out of 10 they will come back or try it again. Yeah. And when that happens, we're able to, asset protection teams have everything that they need to be able to convey that to law enforcement. Yeah. Another myth, and I'll just briefly tell you about two or three.
Please keep going. Yeah.
Another myth is that the asset protection team is only there for physical security, like they're only there to protect the building or the product, and that's a myth. Retailers, my line to retailers, or my communication to teams all the time, is that the employees, your frontline employees, are the number one asset that a company has. And so the asset protection team, while yes, product's important, physical security of the building is important, the employees are the most important, because those are the ones that interact with the customer. They're the ones that, as I always would say, make the register go cha-ching. And when that happens, we're in business. And so while yes, those other areas are important, the safety and security of the teams, the frontline workers, and the consumers are just as important as the product and the building and the inventory that's in there. And then the last thing I'll say here is that another myth that I always hear is that the asset protection team is hired because the company doesn't trust their employees. And that's a myth. That's 100% a myth. Asset protection is not there or not built because of distrust towards employees. They're there to create that safe and secure working environment, which at times, yes, it does mean that asset protection might have to investigate internal concerns or employee concerns or theft that might happen within the store, but that's not their sole purpose. They are there for a safe and a safe environment, a safe shopping experience, and one that is pleasant for the consumer and the employees.
And so if we back up, thank you, Khris. And if we back up and say, that first myth that you said around, well, I saw it, so did you see it on camera? Why don't you do something? We're today sitting and saying, well, there's some laws that are changing that would say, we actually don't want you to do anything. Yeah. And I know that's often really difficult for stores to do. Some of these videos that you see of employees chasing after, potential crime only because they're so passionate about their business and they see money walking out the door. And we both know that's not the right choice. And there have been difficult decisions made by brands because of some of those choices that employees have made. And we don't have to discuss them, but I think that's a myth of, well, you want me to protect my building and my people, but I also, in some ways my hands are tied. And rightly so. So like unravel that a little bit.
I bring this to an analogy. It is, if somebody came in my front door and picked up my TV and started walking out of the house with it, I'd be very upset. And I'm going to go grab my TV. Now, of course, I got 6 other TVs in the house, but if somebody just came in my house and did that, I find that very disrespectful. And so, like our frontline employees, like that's how they feel when somebody comes in their house. The difference, though, is that TV can be replaced, that shirt can be replaced, those items within the retail setting can be replaced. The life of one of those of our employees cannot. And so that is the most important piece where it might feel like from a frontline employee or a person that sees this happen every day that, man, I'm just frustrated. I can't let it happen today. But at the end of it all, the camera systems that are there, the intellectual data that is retained from those events that are happening within the stores, all that is evidentiary pieces of information that at some point that person is going to continue to come back. And one day that asset protection team is going to have every step that they need to be able to either make that apprehension or connect with law enforcement or refer the matter to a prosecutor to make that apprehension and to really hold that person accountable for all of their actions. It's not worth the life of a person and to jump the gun and do something that could hurt their safety or the safety of those individuals around them. Just, I tell everybody it can get very emotional at times, but take the emotion out of it. And remember, we sell socks and t-shirts every day, and nobody's life is worth that.
Yeah, exactly right. And so I guess that leads me to my question around building relationships, because the great relationships are built on trust. And as a frontline employee, I have to trust that you are there to protect my own personal safety. You have to trust then that I, as a frontline worker, also make smart decisions. And so I think this relationship between the frontline and asset protection has evolved. Yeah, I think in many ways it's gotten better.
Yeah, like when I started almost 30 years ago, and I hate to say that, but almost 30 years ago when I started in the retail industry, asset protection might have been known as that's that door down the hall with the peephole, like those guys that sit there and watch TV all day, and then you see them run down and make an apprehension and take them back into that other room. That is what was known of the asset protection team. With the evolution that's happened over the last 30 years or so, has been your asset protection teams are no longer that cop and robber mentality. These individuals are business professionals. They are sitting at the table with their regional leaders, their district leaders, their corporate leaders. They're sitting at the table, when their CEO is at the table speaking and gathering information to go back to the board. These leaders are at each of those tables, and they're making business decisions. And that what that is promoted now, it's promoted a level of collaboration, like you talked about, Ron. This is where those head of stores, those regional VPs of stores or DVPs of stores, they're together with their asset protection leaders, walking stores, interacting with employees, building training programs for the employees. It's not all about, like I said earlier, about the physical security. It's about how do we prevent the next event that's going to happen. How do we prevent it, or how do we prepare ourselves to go through it? Those are the mentalities that the asset protection leaders are leaning into now. And we saw this hugely in the industry as we dealt with COVID. As we pull through COVID and we first were introduced to COVID, and then we had to manage, and now we're living with COVID. You saw your asset protection teams take on contact tracing. You saw them pick up and start doing things when it dealt with the high violent offenses in the stores, and doing different tactical procedures to be able to make it difficult for individuals to get out with large amounts of merchandise, or protecting stores while we were shut down. You saw this evolution at a very fast pace of these leaders now being integral parts of the total business decisions that were happening across the brands. And so that's where we are. And I tell all frontline workers, your level of collaboration, building the trust communicating, providing feedback. Feedback is something that it's welcome from the frontline teams to asset protection. We're in this together. Our paychecks all say the same company name in the top left corner. We're in this together. And our goal is to be able to work together to provide that safe shopping environment for our consumers, for each of us as employees, and to also drive some profitability out of this as well.
Exactly right. And I guess there's a third pillar when I think about trust that we didn't really speak about, and that's with the customer. Yeah. And as the front line, like, how do we build trust that the customer also feels safe? Yeah. Because you can go into a dark hole on YouTube and really like terrify yourself enough to not shop, and that's not what any of us want. And so how do we, what advice would you give to the front line to help them build trust with their customer, that they, to the best of their ability, are in a safe environment?
Yeah, I'll say this, whenever I was making those key decisions for what was going to happen within a retail brand, any of the ones that I supported, I had to take a step back. I couldn't make that decision as Khris Hamlin. I had to make that decision through the customer's lens. So like what I mean by that is I put myself in the customer's shoes. When I walked the store, I walked it as a customer. What are they looking at? How is the consumer? What is she going towards? What is she picking up first? And it is the decision I'm about to make, the cabling, the tagging, the extra fixture, the barbed wire around it. Are those decisions going to prohibit her ability to be able to shop it? And once I had a clear look at it from the customer's lens, I didn't have to take another step and look at it from the employee's lens. Am I making am I securing it so much that the employee has to have a duty belt of keys or devices to uncable or untether or whatever the case might be? How can I make it as simple as possible that the consumer can shop it, the employee can deliver it, and we can, at the end of it, close out a sale and retain a customer that's going to be happy and feel safe about shopping in that experience, or have that shopping experience in the store? And that goes all the way down, Ron, to placement of maybe a uniform guard. Like how do I change when the consumer is coming to the store? Just a presence of feeling that somebody is there to be able to guard against any bad element that could happen in that environment, and what is the appropriate level of stance for that? There's a lot of pieces, but I always went back to customer lens, employee lens, make it easy for the customer to shop, safe for her, to give her the environment that she feels safe shopping in, and make it as easy for the employees to deliver on the customer's needs while she's in the store.
Those are big goals, by the way. Just listening to you describe that, really big goals, but really important goals. Yeah. It's this is there's a lot of conversation, and we're going into NRF next week. Many people have said, like, the year of the store, the resurgence of retail, all of this, the challenges of e-commerce and the growth of store counts. Like, there's a lot happening at the store. But what you just described is another layer of complexity beyond many of the other complexities that we have to talk about, and that are really important. And when people say retail is not brain surgery, I'm like, yes, but it's highly complex. And that's my mission around, like, celebrating people who work on the front lines and do this hardest work. It is really complex and important, and requires partnerships of everybody in the corporate office, everybody in field leadership roles like you, or business partners like RILA, all of it. It's a very complex business, and this is what you do is another part of it.
Absolutely.
If we could just talk a little bit about some of the tools and resources and kind of the development of what that looks like going into this year.
Yeah, and we've seen a lot of progression when it comes to tools, tactics, measures. You heard me talk a little bit about RILA's Vibrant Communities Initiative. This initiative at RILA, we launched this in 2023. And the goal with this is you think about your favorite store. You think about that favorite store you like shopping at. You don't care if the line is long, you don't care if the parking lot is full. You go there because of that experience, or maybe it's the employee that works there. Something draws you back to that favorite place. And what we're faced with today, in this era of retail, is retailers are having to make tough decisions on, do we keep stores open in certain areas? It's not safe here. We're constantly dealing with organized retail crime. There's so many elements that the retailer has to determine, especially around this time, because we're about to do inventory in stores, and we're going to start looking at numbers and things like that, and retailers have to make some tough calls. The big thing about the Vibrant Communities Initiative, the goal here is, how do we give retailers some tools and tactics, an initiative or a program that can help connect or collaborate with retailers, law enforcement, prosecutors, bring them all together and look at ways to curb some of this retail crime. We're all aware that high violence retail crime is plaguing the retail industry right now. And so looking at ways to be able to curb that, the goal of Vibrant Communities is to end recidivism, to go after those habitual offenders that are causing the loss and the violence within the retail setting for the workplace and the shopping environment for the consumer. It's also geared at finding the appropriate resources. So not burdening down the criminal justice system with lower level offenders, but providing, the proper social service and interventions out there for those unhoused individuals, those individuals that are abusing drugs, or bringing that element into the work, or to the retail environment in itself, and also looking at ways to be able to really leverage or connect jurisdictions. That's the other piece. A person does it in one county, and then when they run dry there, they go to the next county. And so it just hurts the retailer over and over again. But how do we connect these groups together so that charges can be aggregated, and stronger penalties can apply? And so, Vibrant Communities launched in 2023. It's pushing forward in 2024. The goal is really building this program out that can be rolled out and duplicated in many cities across the U.S. And that's the goal that we're really leaning into here at RILA as we move forward into 2024.
Wow. And as we wrap up, Khris, what are some ways people can learn more about RILA?
Absolutely.
Kind of tell us how brands work with you. I know you have a very important list of people that you already do. All the biggest retailers in the country work with you, but what else should people know?
I urge you to learn more about RILA. If you haven't heard about RILA or engage with RILA, check us out at RILA.org. You can find us online. You can actually go to RILA.org/asset protection and be able to see specifically about asset protection, learn more about the Vibrant Communities Initiative. And if that initiative sounds like something that could be beneficial to your local communities, engage with us. Let's talk about it. Let's bring people together, and let's figure out how to make that happen as we build this template to be rolled out and duplicated across the U.S.
Incredible. And I guess just thinking about 2024 and beyond, and what kind of, as we mentioned, the complexities of this topic, and having resources like you and RILA, and then a peer group and some places to go to learn more, are incredibly valuable. And I just want to restate that, you're not always on your own. I know it can feel like that on the front line. So share this maybe with leaders in your organization of have you heard about RILA? Because I will admit I didn't, and I work for a very large brand. So there are resources and people like you that can help on this really difficult topic.
Absolutely. And we welcome any and everybody to connect and learn more. We welcome you to our conference. We have one coming up in April that'll be in Dallas, Texas. We welcome you to engage. You'll find all that at RILA.org as well. But we welcome you to be able to engage, collaborate, and grow with us as we go after changing and improving the landscape across the retail industry.
Amazing. Making it vibrant communities.
That's it, Ron.
I love that. I love that term. Vibrant communities. We all want to live in a vibrant community.
Yep.
For sure. Great. Well, thank you, Khris. I know you have a year ahead of you that I'm sure will be another one for the books, a memorable one. And I wish you the best of luck. And thank you for being on the show today.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Ron.
And our friendship. I'm excited to spend some more time together. Great. Thank you.
Absolutely.
So thanks everyone for being for listening today, and for Khris for being on the podcast. I am heading to NRF shortly early next week as part of the big National Retail Federation in partnership with YOOBIC. So YOOBIC will be at booth number 6045. Feel free to stop by their booth, learn more about YOOBIC. I know they have quite a number of events happening. You can go to yoobic.com and learn more about those events, and then some of their sponsored speakers. I will be on stage next Friday, kicking off the National Retail Foundation events, and then back on stage on Monday, the 15th with T-Mobile. And to our listeners, keep learning and inspiring. The next episode of Frontline Fridays will be on January 19th after NRF in 2 weeks, featuring conversation with Peloton's Director of Global Sales Operations, Peyton McFadden, right here on LinkedIn Live. And be sure to follow YOOBIC on LinkedIn for all those details. And if you're on the hunt for more communication, micro-learning, task management tools, and a guide to your frontline teams in the future, check out what YOOBIC has done at NRF next week, or on their website. So thank you, Khris, and everyone have a great weekend ahead.